Matt, welcome to Beyond Cinema Studio. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing film, so powerful. The opening scene was really just got me. I mean, I was in the film before the title even came on. How and when did you shoot that first scene with the meth makers? And one of the opening lines was, "If we listen to our hearts, we'd be screwed." How did that come about?
So the film is, it's a story about citizen vigilantes who've sort of taken the law into their own hands to fight back against the drug cartels. And both one group in Arizona and one group in Mexico. And the cartel that they're fighting back against in Mexico is the Knights Templar cartel. And the sort of cash cow of this cartel is meth. And so from day one when I was down there, I knew I wanted to get in a meth lab. And shoot in a meth lab. And it took us about 8 months to get in there. Every shoot, every time I went down there, I would ask somebody, do you know somebody, who cooks, as they say. And finally, eventually, we got a call on one of our last shoots saying, hey, they're ready for you. And we met at a town square at a given time. They drove us into a field, switched cars, drove us somewhere else, switched cars, and then we were in there. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Like they, to them, they're farmers. They're cultivators of a crop, and it just happens that that crop is meth. It just happens that that crop goes northward and ruins lives. But
Now, were you the only person shooting that opening scene with the meth?
yeah.
I mean, everyone's going to wonder these questions. I mean, do you have backup? I mean, how do you...
You don't bring a knife to a good gunfight. Like that kind of backup?
Well, anything. I mean, do people know where you are? I mean, what does your mother think of this? I mean,
My mom is not very happy. The reason I actually went down to Mexico is I started filming these vigilantes in Arizona. And then after 4 or 5 months, my dad sent me this article in the Wall Street Journal about the Mexican vigilantes. And like this bell went off. I was like, oh my God, this could be this amazing parallel story of vigilantes on both sides of the border. And 3 weeks later, I was down there, and for a while there, my mom wasn't talking to my dad. But yeah, I mean, we had all sorts of safety protocols. We had a beacon tracking us with a security firm in the States in case we got kidnapped. We always had a series of journalists that were always aware of where we were at all times, what road we were driving on. But at the end of the day, if you're like in a shootout, like I found myself in, there's only so much you can do to protect yourself. And my goal with this film, unlike my previous films, was to really be in the middle of it. It's an experiential film. It's a verite film. It's a character-driven film that starts out in one place and ends up in a much crazier place that I could have never imagined. I thought I was telling a story of good and evil, of guys in white shirts, going against guys with black hats, and it turns out that it was a little grayer than that.
it's amazing. I mean, this is why I think documentaries like yours are so important, because they're not the 30-second soundbite. They're not sort of perpetuating this black, white, good, evil kind of stuff, even though you set that up in the film. I mean, it was interesting because both the American vigilantes saw it that way, and so did the other side, they're just kind of doing their thing.
Yeah.
How did this film change the way you look at the situation, both there and sort of, broader, just geopolitical issues?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I will say that, I really tried to, my last film was called Escape Fire. It was about healthcare in the U.S., and I'm very proud of it. But that was a cause film, it was a policy film, and I really, really tried to make this film not about policy. I tried to sort of get at, find amazing characters who speak about grander themes and about policy, but there's no talking heads, there's no sort of issue or cause that I'm trying to push. But it changed me a ton. I mean, there's an issue I knew nothing about. Even in Arizona, you feel, no matter what political leanings you have, when you're down there on the border, you really do feel like you're abandoned. There's no sheriff in town. There's very little feeling that there's government institutions around. when you're in this valley that we filmed predominantly in. You look up on the mountaintops and there's cartel scouts watching you. There's cartel scouts pushing drugs through the valley, and that's one of the reasons the film's called Cartel Land. Like, even though we're in the States, it's really sort of owned by the cartel and run by the cartel, and obviously that's even more true in Mexico.
What were some of the more difficult things outside of what you would assume? What are things that people maybe didn't know about that was difficult in making this film?
Probably one of the hardest things was it just was changing so rapidly. Every time, in previous films that I made, you have your call sheet and you do your pre-production calls, and you think you go in and you get it done. Here, like, you think you'd be going down to Mexico for one thing, for one like plot point, one story point that was really important, and you get down there and some totally different thing would happen. And so the key was constantly being aware of how the story was shifting, and being there at all the right moments to capture the arc that the film goes on.
It seems quite clear that the film changes and you had to adapt, and so I was fascinated. And how did you deal with that in terms of, did you have funders and stuff? I didn't really.
Yeah, so I have one producing partner, Tom Yellen, the documentary group. We produced the film together, and I'm incredibly fortunate to have A&E Indie Films come on board about halfway through to help fund the rest of the film. And these are hard films to make. These are hard films to fund, and because there's no clear answer, there's no clear ending, it's not a cause film. It's hard to get grant money. So I feel very fortunate that had the support that I had.
What do you hope that this film will do? Where do you hope this film will go? And
I hope to me this film is. It's obviously about the drug war. It's obviously touches on border issues, but I just hope the movie gets as large an audience as possible and moves people, because I think the characters and the stories are it's a really rich story, and it goes in really unexpected places. And my sort of artistic dream was to make a doc sort of feel like a narrative film. And we have these sort of larger-than-life characters, and one of the things that sort of drove me from day one was this idea of what would I do? What would I do if violence came to my front door? What would I do if my sister was raped, or my dad was kidnapped, beheaded? What would I do? And this idea of would I take the law into my own hands? Would I rise up? Is that sustainable? Is that just? Is that right? These are all sort of ideas and questions that I constantly was thinking about, and hopefully the film sort of examines that.
There's an amazing panel at Sundance this year about documentaries. Is it journalism or is it like film? And I think that Alex Gibney said it very well. He sort of stated the fact that that journalism is just who, what, where, when, whereas cinema is something more about the heart. And one of the things that I really loved about your film was, I'm sort of left of center, so this vigilante stuff is kind of not quite my thing.
Right.
But I totally empathize with these guys.
Yeah.
And definitely, drugs is not my thing, but I empathize with them too. And so it did exactly what you were saying. It made me put me in both sides of the shoes, and at moments in thinking, I can empathize with them, and what would I do in that position? The opening scene with the cartel. They're just sitting there. If they were rich, they'd be like you,
Right.
but they're not. And so I thought that was absolutely brilliantly done. Is that something that you thought of originally, or did you sort of find yourself kind of empathizing and realizing, that, wow, these people actually have different sides? Like, was it a discovery for you as well?
Yeah, I think for me, again, as a filmmaker, I felt like this film was finally me. Like, I felt like I was kind of breaking out of the shackles of different films that I'd made in the past. And I don't believe in sort of making films to push your own agenda. I don't believe in having to fit into a neat box. Someone early on asked me when they saw some early footage, is this journalism or is this Shakespeare? And why does it have to be either? Why can't it be both? And I I made the film that I felt moved me, and in many ways, you know, since it was really deeply personal, since I spent so much time, you know, in these really intense situations with both good guys and bad guys, and I want the audience, and I hope the audience will sort of, and as we edited the film, you know, I want the audience to sort of go on that journey in the way I experienced it. I'm not in the film. You don't feel me, or I guess you feel me once during the shootout when the camera sort of flies around a little bit, but you know, I'm not a presence in the film, and so, but I hope that the audience can sort of join me on this journey that I went on.
It was an amazing film. Congratulations. Glad to hear that. Glad to see that you're back alive and well.
Me
in one
too.
piece. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Pleasure,
you.
Matt.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.